Men, what happens if your genitals get twisted? My 5-year-old son had to learn the hard way. I remember hearing the pain in his voice as he came waddling over to me. Mommy, my privates hurt. Like any mother would do, I got on my knees. Let me see. As I looked, a shock of fear went through me. His genitals were red and swollen. I tried not to panic and thought about what it could be. The worst case scenario came to mind. The night before, during bath time, his privates looked normal. Trying my best to not scare my son, quietly, I told him to pull up his pants and put on his shoes. We arrived at the doctor's office 20 minutes later. After the examination, the doctor sent my son into the waiting room and called me in to have a private conversation. Is it bad? I asked. The doctor gave me a look that I had scarcely ever seen. As if what I just asked was the biggest understatement of all time. Is it cancer? Please sit down, he said. I haven't seen anything like this during my time as a doctor, that's for sure. I've already had a colleague of mine on the phone. We're gonna need an ultrasound. Tears welled up in my eyes. Tell me he's going to be okay. I can't say for sure, but I can tell you that if it is some type of cancer, this one is the easiest to treat. He paused. You said he's 5 years old? I nodded and said, I don't understand how his. You know. He hasn't reached puberty yet, so. This can't be normal for a boy his age. Can it? Before we jumped to any conclusions, the doctor said, we need to see the ultrasound. First thing the next morning, I drove to the address on the note and met with a man named Dr. Jasper Harris. He led us both into a room and gave my son a hospital gown. I sat in the waiting room with a book while my son was scanned. Though I was looking at the pages, I wasn't reading. My mind was elsewhere, on my son. Later, Dr. Harris came into the waiting room with a dour look on his face. Come with me, he said. He brought me into a room full of medical computers. Please take a seat. He pulled up a chair next to a large screen. He then showed me the x-rays. The x-rays showed 2 genitals that were larger than any you'd see on a grown man. Both of them came up white on the ultrasound. Surgery must be done immediately. Dr. Harris said, I've never seen anything like this. It seems as if the tumors have encapsulated his genitals. I whimpered in the chair. A hand rested on my shoulder to console me. It didn't help. Nothing could be done that day because of complications due to the coronavirus. I was lucky enough to even have gotten an appointment for the ultrasound that day, so I counted my blessings and stayed patient. When we were driving home from the hospital, he was sitting in his booster seat when he asked, Mama? I looked at his reflection in the mirror. Yes? When we die, do we go to heaven like Grandma says? I was speechless. What was I supposed to say? And how did the idea of death get on his mind? Did the doctor say something to him? Was it just a coincidence? Or was there some kind of primal intuitiveness that made him aware of how severe his illness was? A single tear slipped down my cheek. I don't know, baby. Before my son was put under, he cried and made it clear that he wanted me in the room while the surgery was performed. I want you with me, he'd said. He lay there on the operating table, unconscious. The surgeon and his helpers were shuffling about, preparing for the incision of the cancerous bulbs hanging between my son's legs. I stood in the corner of the cold operation room wearing a medical apron, rubber gloves, face mask, and a pair of goggles. I was looking at my feet, waiting for the inevitable. Would he be a freak to his peers? An outcast to society? Would he ever find someone to love him? These strange, unwanted thoughts floated in my mind like a rocket on a predetermined trajectory through the star systems of the cosmos. They told me not to watch if I didn't want to. I wasn't, but once I heard the scalpel cut through flesh, there was this sound. A wriggling sound. A sloppy, greasy, writhing sound. The bodies of the medical professionals surrounded my son so I was unable to see him. I stood on my toes but I still wasn't tall enough to see. Oh my God, a nurse said. Wet slapping sounds came. Something was dropping on the room's floor. Blood? The doctor and nurses stood back. One nurse yipped and dropped a stainless steel tool she had been holding. She ran out of the room, the door swinging behind her. The sound of wet drip still came. I looked at the surgeon's feet. Something was wiggling on the floor. Snakes? No, too small for that. Centipede? No, they didn't have legs. As the surgeon and the remaining nurse moved away from the table, I was able to see everything. They were cracked open like eggs. Wet goo and slime from a world far beyond the comprehension of the human imagination spewed out from between my baby's legs. My son's genitals had a nest of worms inside of them. They writhed and squirmed and moved and slopped over the table, down to the floor, and over the shoes of the surgeon and nurse. I fainted and cracked my head on the tile floor. I was removed from the room and woke up in a chair located in the large waiting area. I remember squinting because the chair I was sitting in faced the windows where the sunset was. A nurse walked over to me. My son, I bolted straight up. Where's my son? Those things. Is he all right? He lost some blood but the procedure is over. You can see him in a few hours. I talked to the surgeon about what happened at the operation table. The only answer I got regarding what was inside of my son was, we're not completely sure what they are or what species of parasitic organisms they belong to. We've run some tests to see if he still had any left inside, but we're not sure if he's clean. We'll have to put him on mebendazole. It's the best we can do for now. And that was it. The men in the black suits showed up to interview me, my son, the surgeon, and both nurses. It's been 2 months since the operation. My son had to stay in a rehabilitation center for about a month and a half, which wasn't fun for either of us. I'm now on anxiety medication. It started the day after I took my son home for the first time in a while. I just lay awake at night worrying about him. Every 5 minutes, I would get out of bed and go into his room to check on him. I wouldn't get any sleep and I had to spend time away from work. Things have been hard lately because of it. Child support is next to nothing, no thanks to my ex-husband. At least it seems like the medication is working, so now I'm able to sleep. They sent my son home with a clean bill of health minus 2 genitals, or so they thought. I'm sitting in a waiting room once again. Yesterday, while eating a bowl of cereal and watching the Idiot Box, my son stepped out of his bedroom and shuffled into the kitchen. He said 4 words. "Mommy, my eyes hurt."